Hello, and welcome to our latest episode of What's on the Horizon. I'm Lori Sharonbrock here with Chris Suer of Digital Horizons, and we're coming to you from the awesome Experience Center here in Brainerd, Minnesota. And I want to talk to you about maybe one of your favorite topics today is audio.
Yep.
Yeah, audio is a fun topic.
Near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you in other podcast or video broadcasts, we've talked about zones, and I'm not sure that can entirely make sense to someone. But what do you mean by zones when it comes to audio?
Yeah, so it's the basic description of just a separate area of an audio system. So there's kind of two ways to do, let's say just residential audio.
Sure.
So in somebody's home. There's kind of two ways to do it. One where all speakers throughout the house, they play the same music selection, whether it's radio or streamed music or whatever. We would call that a one zone system. And historically, the way that's been set up is somebody would provide a nice big amplifier, and then you'd have however many speakers you have throughout the home. And then usually there'd be a bunch of volume controls.
Okay.
And so then you would have one big zone of music, and then with the ability to, adjust the volume throughout. And the way that's changed nowadays, at least for the last decade or so or more, that's been common as, electronics have improved and costs have come down is the ability to have each area of the home be its own independent zone.
Yeah.
And so the benefit of that is, take the master suite, for example, where you'd have, bedroom, bathroom, maybe a walk-in closet, that type of area. Both halves of the household don't always get up at the same time or listen to the same music.
Yeah.
So if Mary gets up and goes to the bathroom or gets up to get ready in the morning and Joe's still in bed and it's 9 o'clock, well, Mary wants to listen to music.
Sure.
If the whole house is one big zone and they didn't remember to turn the volume control off the night before she turns the music on, then, Joe will be...
That's an alarm clock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So by having each individual area operate independently, that means that Mary, almost forgot her name, can wake up, go to the bathroom, turn on her favorite music at a lower volume, and have music in the bathroom with the door closed and not interrupt anybody else in the household.
Sure.
Conversely, if the kids are up late or something like that and they're up in the bonus room and they want to jam out to music, they can have their music on. So and it goes beyond just having each area act independently from an on and off state to different volume levels. You can have systems that each area or each zone of the house can have different music selections too.
Oh, yeah.
So if you want to take Control 4, for example, which is one of the primary automation systems we use. With Control 4, we can feed many, many streams of music into the audio system so that you can have different selections. And so you'd open up Control 4, choose the room that you want to run, and then choose the music source that you want. And typically there's 2 to 4 selections available, and it can be more. But in a normal household, usually how we dictate things is, how many different things do you think you'll listen to simultaneously? Sure. And if if it's a husband and wife and a couple kids, it's probably 2 or 3 selections. Rarely does everybody need their own music. So you can go in there, choose the room that you want to listen to, and then have something different playing in each area.
Sure.
And then the last step to it is you can group areas when you have this type of a system. So again, with Control 4, there's a page in the app called Sessions, and you can see what's currently playing throughout the home. And you can add, so let's say you have a session going where the master bedroom, the kitchen, and the great room are all playing Pandora. Well, you can choose that one and add the foyer and add the master bathroom, and then those areas are just seamlessly added to it. And then it's usually done at a preset level. So, for example, your master bedroom, you'd probably turn it on to a little louder volume than you might in the bathroom because it's a smaller space.
Sure.
So the startup volume might be 30% versus 20%, or different for the great room and for the kitchen and all of those areas. So that's kind of how zones are dictated in this day and age.
Is it harder to create zones? So, for example, a lot of homes now are what people would call like more open concept.
Mhm.
And like to a certain degree here in the experience center, you can kind of get that too. Like the kitchen is pretty open to this living room area. Is it
Yeah.
harder to delineate different zones when a space is super open like that?
So what I usually say is your best thing that you can do is picture everything being on at the same time and what your
Sure.
end goal is. And generally with house audio, the best thing to do is you want, well, not even just with house audio in general, but you want to treat audio or sound like you do lights.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So if you're trying to light your home, you don't, generally speaking, in a typical living room or just a space in general, the best way to do it is with more lights,
Yeah.
more recessed cans, that type of thing. You're not going to, if you have a big great room, for example, that's a living room and a kitchen and a dining room, you're not going to put one big giant floodlight on the fireplace to beam the whole room with sound or
Sure.
light. And just same thing with audio. So if your goal is to cover that entire space with audio, you would at the baseline plan for speakers in all those areas, and then have them be separate zones. So the dining room
Sure.
can be its own, kitchen can be its own, great room can be its own. And then when you're using it in a day-to-day fashion, you can dictate which or all of those areas are on,
Sure.
so that your baseline or your best case scenario is that everything can be on. And then when you have more speakers, even if they are zoned out, they can all be on at a lower volume and you get more even coverage.
Sure.
So for example, if you want to have sound in the dining room, you don't have to have the kitchen louder in order for it to be properly heard in the dining room. You can have it at a lower volume. Just like if you wanted to be in the dining room and talking with friends and still wanted music, when the speakers are right there, you can just turn them way down.
Sure.
So that at Christmas time, Christmas music is there, and it's a part of the space, rather than, oh, let me go to the great room and jack up the sound bar so that we can hear it throughout the room. When you have more of them, even if they are by nature zoned out separately, the more you have, the more even, smoother of coverage that you can have.
And kind of going back to what you were just saying too, that, if you wanted it quieter in the dining room because you're playing a board game or having conversation, that doesn't mean it has to be quiet out in the living room.
Right.
It gives you more control over what's happening instead of, like you said, one dictating
Correct.
the whole situation. Is there a such thing as too many zones?
No. I mean, it really comes down to the space itself.
Sure.
Like you wouldn't, for example, in a great room, you wouldn't have multiple zones in the great room.
Just one.
You would just have the one zone. The caveat to that might be where your TV and the audio for the TV is its own zone, and then you have a pair of speakers in the ceiling just for music.
Sure.
Because audio coverage for a larger space like that is better suited by, an in-ceiling speaker versus, say, a sound bar. But generally speaking, your multi-purpose rooms aren't going to have their own separate, zones within them. So that would be, if you have I would say your clearly defined rooms would just be its own zone if you wanted music in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, the thing to remember is, like, people always think they can do it themselves, but I think it's always best to sit and talk with someone like you to say, what is the goal and what is the objective in doing this? And don't assume you just have to have like the one thing to try and make the whole house sound great, that you do have options. And when you get into that, it's best to work with someone to do that.
Yeah. And the nice thing about, up-to-date electronics and doing zoned systems is they're often easy to put into older homes that were wired, because as long as all of your speaker wire goes to the same location, which it often does no matter what you're doing, it's just a change in electronics that enables things to be zoned out so that you can do what we've been talking about.
That is kind of nice that audio is one of those things that you generally don't have to open walls for.
Yeah, unless you're trying to add speakers to an area, or something needs to be serviced, of course. But yeah, assuming everything's working and nothing needs to be added. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if you're considering something like that or having like a whole home audio system, a great place to start is with a consultation with Digital Horizons and giving Chris a call. All their information, the website should be down below. It's a really good place to start to get some of that information. And then they're really incredible to work with. Plus, you might get a visit to the Experience Center out of the deal, which is pretty nice. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.